Hey, everybody. I am Stephanie Goss, and this is another episode of the Uncharted Podcast. This week on the podcast, Andy and I are in the mailbag. We're tackling a question from a doctor who is asking, hey, why is me being dedicated to my clients? And in this case, a very specific red herring client who is a breeder of French bulldogs. Why is being dedicated to them seen as untrustful by the team? And why is it such a big problem? Things are rarely as they seem on the surface because we all know that there is at least two sides to every story, and the truth usually lies somewhere close to the middle. So let's get into this.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.
And we are back. It's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and the one and only Stephanie Come to My Window Goss. I have been thinking
That was a hard
so
one for
hard.
you.
I was really struggled today. And so I made Stephanie sit here while I thought about it before I hit record. And then I feel like it definitely did not live up to the amount of time that it was no hype. It was just, it's like in improv comedy, if there's time to make a choice, you should make a choice fast. Because if you don't make a choice and you stall, the audience is like, oh, buddy, when he says it, this is going to be good. And then you really have to deliver. And so I should have just hit record and said what came to my mouth 5 minutes ago, but I didn't. So now, come to my window. That's what I got. How are you?
Did not live up to the anticipation.
No.
Especially because while you were trying to figure it out, I was thinking and also using our friend ChatGPT to think of names. And now I have one song in particular in my head and I can hear you doing it. And so I'm going to have to save it for a rainy day.
Okay.
It's a good one.
We can certainly do that. How have you been?
I am good. How are you?
I am vilified. I've been publicly attacked recently.
It was so well
much
deserved
hate.
and
I've gotten
so
much hate. I know. The number of people who think I deserve it too also bothers me with how much hate I've gotten recently. So I said loud and proud, I just call people. I just pick up the phone and I just call. If I am walking my dog, I will think, I haven't talked to in a while, Stephanie Goss. Or I'll be looking into the woods and there'll be a bird and I'm like, it's a beautiful golden bird. That reminds me of Stephanie Goss. I'll call her. And then I just call her. And I thought that's how the world still communicated, but I have been told very clearly that it's not. But the resistance has arisen. I've gotten private message from a lot of people who are like, I just call them. And so there is a secret brotherhood of those of us who just pick up the phone and call someone when we think about them. And we don't text them. That's too much of a commitment for me. I'm totally fine if people don't answer my call, but I don't want to it's not a satellite launch here. Let's just see if this works. And if not, I'm going on with my day. I'm going to move to the next person on my mental Rolodex that I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll just go on.
The funny part about that is I remember very early on in our Uncharted teaminess when we had a group conversation about the fact that you had no idea that literally the entire team would drop whatever was happening when you called one of us. Because we were like, oh, Andy's calling, it must be really important.
Yeah. And I'd be like, hey, I'm looking at a bird that it reminds me of you. It's the same color as your hair. What you doing?
And I was always like, oh, okay, cool. I'm in the middle of talking to Mel or I'm in the middle of talking to Jamie. Can I call you back? And you'd be like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And then as we found out, nobody else on the team
was like, this is clear. He's secretly delivering an important message to me.
It became this whole big thing. And I will say, it is still very Gen X of you to just pick up the phone and call someone.
I know.
And I would say that you communicate with a lot of millennials.
Yeah.
And a lot of Gen Zers. And they do not pick up the phone like a savage and call people.
They pick up the phone for me, though. I tell you that. That's part of I'm moving. This is how I'm going to become the eccentric old man. It's like, oh, Andy Roark just randomly calls. And I will tell you this, too. if you don't answer, I'm going to call somebody else. So if you call me back in 5 minutes, I'm not going to answer you back. And like,
I learned that lesson a long time ago.
Yeah. I kind of like that about myself, even though I understand other people.
I just text you back because if it actually is important enough that you want to talk to me, you'll text me back and be like, yeah, I'll call you when this, you know? And I'm like, okay, really is important enough because otherwise I know you better to know than to call you. I used to very early on, and then you would never answer. And I'm like, what the shit? Why did you send me to voicemail? You just called me.
Like, yeah, you missed your window. I have moved on.
I moved on.
I have called someone else who was startled, who clearly thought this was an emergency and answered.
And picked up the phone. Yes. Speaking of that, you had your privileges revoked.
I did.
On my phone.
I did.
Because you, for the last 8 years, you have been on my, like, emergency favorites list that rings through even if it's on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
And because my phone is always on silent. Well, I learned that was a choice last for 8 years. It has not been a problem. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was at an appointment and I had told you the day before, hey, I'm going to be offline between this time and this time tomorrow. So if you need anything from me before or after that. And then I reminded everybody that morning. And then sure enough, during that time slot, my phone starts blowing up. And I'm looking down at it and I'm sweating because I am just like,
what is
someone must be dying because I told them this was the only time slot all day that I was unavailable. Why has Andy now called me 3 times in a row? And it rang through because you did the hang up call back thing. And so you're on that list and you call through. And then I messaged you when I was done and I was like, is everything okay? Like, what do you need? And you're like, oh, nothing. I was just calling.
What's that really?
To check on blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay. Remember yesterday when I told you?
Yeah.
And so I was telling Ron and Ron was like, oh my God, revoke his privileges, please.
Yeah.
Take him off the list.
That's I think that's fair. I agree. I think that's probably the right
call.
To
his point, he was like, to be fair, in an emergency, do you want somebody to open your phone and try and call Andy? Because he won't answer his phone anyway.
That's true. That's totally true. Yeah.
I was like, I mean, that's well deserved.
Yeah, that's true. All right.
Okay, well, let's get into this episode for today. We've got a good one.
This is a great one. Yeah, this one's really, really fun.
We've got a good one. I think this is one of those ones that the actual question they ask isn't the question. And
yeah, there's a lot going on here. But this is good. If you like to hear the story behind the story, this is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one starts out with a question. And the question that they start with is, why is being dedicated to the clients seen as untrustful and problematic by other vets and the team?
Yeah, so I read that and I was intrigued. I was like, ooh, tell me more.
Yes. And so here's the backstory. This is a practice that has a number of locations. And over the weekends, they run all of the services out of one location. And our mail bag episode comes to us from the leader of that one location. And so as a result, on the weekends, they have team members who are not regulars that are working, or they only work weekends. And so there are clients who are regulars at one of the locations that might come in, but they might see team members that they're not familiar with, right? Which makes total sense. And so as a result, there's some anxiety probably by some clients because they're having faith in the practice group as a whole versus their preferred location, their preferred doctor, et cetera. And this becomes important because recently the hospital had a team who is a good client of this doctor's. They are a breeder and they are a French Bulldog breeder. And so they had a cesarean that needed to be done over the weekend. And so the doctor was like, this client and I have built up a lot of trust, and I think that they can be demanding. However, I have been able to develop a really good relationship. And when you communicate really well and you show caring and compassion, like this client is super trusting and will do what you recommend because they want the best for their dogs. The weekend that the dog needed the C-section, this vet wasn't on. And the doctor in charge said, we do have some vets who have different opinions about some of our local breeders. And so I wasn't working. There were capable vets on and felt like I should come in to help because it's a kind of high maintenance client. The team wasn't necessarily anticipating it, and I was trying to be helpful. The team pushed back against that and basically was like, hey, if you come in, then you're giving in to the demands of a client and you're letting this client get the message that they get whatever they want. All they have to do is complain or not even complain, and they're going to get what they want. And so the team was like, under no circumstances should you come in and do this C-section. And so the doctor was like, on one hand, I see where the team is coming from. And I also know the client really well. And so I felt like the easier thing to do would be to come in, do the C-section, which I love doing because I love surgery. The client's going to be super happy because I have a great relationship with them. And the client is going to continue referring business to us because they're happy with the experience. And this doctor was like, I love what I do. I love serving my clients and helping pets. I understand work-life balance and I'm supported in that. And I feel like the message I got from the team was that they don't trust me. And the question that they're asking is, do I have to take the risk that the team may be mad at me and do what I want with clients that I've built relationships with, or do I give in to the team saying no and potentially risk the clients being unhappy?
No, I think you should bend the team to your will. You should break them with an iron fist. And basically, I've found that raising my voice and saying things like, you will obey me that's the way to move things forward. No, wait, hold on. So I understood what she was saying as a little bit different in that when I read this, I see it as the team is saying, you don't trust us. That's why you're coming in, as opposed to the team is saying they don't trust me, or the doctor or something like that. That's kind of how I read it. Okay. All right. Yes, there's a lot going on here. And I will tell you, I resonate with this person. I like the idea. It is nice to have someone say, I like doing C-sections. I like being a vet. I like helping people. I like this client. Like, that's good to see and to hear. And I like when people say that because we do have a great profession. And it is amazing to be able to do surgery. I think at a deep level, it feels good to me as a human being to have a skill that other people don't have and to be able to say, yep, I'll do it. Also, it feels fantastic when clients say to you, hey, Dr. Roark, you're my favorite vet. I really, really love working with you and I trust you, and it would mean a lot to me if you could do this thing for me specifically because you are the chosen one. You are the one that I want. You're the one that I want. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Something like that feels, and we all dance together and it feels good. But I get it. And so I just want to say, I think that this Headspace is good and positive, and I really, really like it. That said, there's a couple things in Headspace we have to lay down. To me, first of all, let's own, this is a big operation. You have multiple hospitals and they close down, and then everybody comes to this one place on Saturdays. There's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of people that you don't know that well who's coming in. You might be the director at this place, but the people who are coming in, they work at another place. They don't know you very well. The fact that you can throw this operation together and have a bunch of nomads come together on Saturday and make a thing go, that by itself is pretty impressive. And so let's just throw together the scope of this, because this is not, and I think that's really important, context really matters. This is not a one vet practice where you're not the vet scheduled on Saturday and things have been generally slow, and usually there's some techs kind of hanging around looking for things to do on Saturday. That's a different animal than what we're talking about here. So I think that's important. There's nothing wrong with loving your job and wanting to help people, and I think that that's really important. I think that there's also this there's this narrative that we throw out in management and just in our profession in general. And it's one of those things where everybody has seen the worst case scenario. And so we jump right to, you got to be careful. Don't you dare.
Yes.
And I reject the idea that if you want to help someone, then your personal boundaries are just going to crumble. And the next thing you know, you're going to be sobbing in the bathroom because you're overwhelmed. It's like, I don't believe that. It's not that. It would be like saying, if you have never in your life had a problem with alcohol at all, you can have an occasional drink and it's not, you know what I mean? You're not hurtling towards a problem. Now, we've all seen, we've probably known people who have problems with alcohol. And so makes sense to say, hey, careful with that, because bad things can happen to people. I think that's smart. But the metaphor kind of stands for me like that. It's like, I'm not someone who's like, don't you dare ever go in on your day off to help somebody. Because you're talking to a guy who literally last week had the neighbors come to his house because their little dog Squirt had hurt her back. And they didn't know that she had hurt her back. She was crying and she wasn't eating and she wouldn't go to the bathroom. And I was like, they're like, do we go to the emergency clinic? And I was working in the yard. And they called me and I answered it like a freaking hero. And I said, why don't you come to the house and let me see this beast? But there'll be some people who'll be like, oh, Andy, you never let people come to your house. I was like, they live my neighbors. Like, it made me feel good. They have, given me jars of honey and like just neighbor gifts and stuff. And they're so lovely. And I'm happy to help them. And so I reject the idea that you can never help anybody else. But the last part of this is to say, so all that is true. And you have to understand, at a large operation like this, when you go off script, there are ripple effects that affect other people. Yeah. And so I learned that the hard way. That was a lesson that I had to have beaten into me over a couple of years. But sometimes Andy wanting to help somebody really makes a big pain in the rear for other people. Yeah. Even though I'm like, God, guys, I'll just do it. I won't be in anybody's way. Yes, I would be in their way. And there was a lot of ripple effects, and we can sort of talk about that in a bit. But that's kind of my headspace is, good on you for wanting to do this. And also, we're going to need to think really sort of critically about what happens in this. The last part I'll say then I'm going to shut up. But the last part of this is with headspace. When you're the doctor, especially when you're the director, medical director, sometimes people say things to you in a very nice way that they think that you will be likely to hear it and maybe not get upset with them. But they're not really telling you why they're having the thoughts they are. So they say stuff like, when you do this, it makes us feel like you don't trust us. And the reality is, when you do this, it's a massive pain in our neck and it makes everybody angry and turns our morning into a disaster. But they don't want to tell you that because that might be upsetting to you. And they'd much rather say, hey, we're worried about your personal boundaries. Don't you want to look out for yourself?
Yeah. So it's funny because that is where my head immediately went when it comes to headspace. Like this, on the surface, I think that this looks like a debate about client expectations and work-life balance. But really, I think this is about trust and the dynamics between you as a leader and the team. And I think that there's really two big chunks to it. One is what the team might be feeling. So it is entirely possible that they are concerned about the consequences giving in to a high maintenance client, right? We have all seen the impact of what can happen when that and there's always one at every clinic where that high maintenance client gets given into, and they become a tyrant, right? So we've all seen that impact. And to your point, that's where our heads go. So it could absolutely be about that. It is also possible when we think about what are some of the stories we could be telling in our heads, it is possible that the team could see it as you not trusting them, not thinking that they're good enough to handle the case, not being good enough to handle the client because you don't work with them regularly. And that could absolutely be a trust issue that is come into play here. And they may or may not feel comfortable telling you that. It's also possible that they're worried that if you come in, that it's reinforcing messaging with the client that only the client should only trust you, not the team, which is a concern as well, especially in bigger practices. We have to create the environment where the team has just as much, if not more, trust from the clients than the doctors, because the team is going to be there and be seen much more than the doctors. Whereas in a small, like one doctor practice, is often flipped, right? The doctor is the heart of the practice, then the team often falls around it. This is a big operation. The team needs the clients to be able to trust them. So it could be about that as well. It also, to your point, is possible that the team is feeling like if our boss, our leader, is willing to come in on their day off, is that the expectation for us too? Should we have to come in on a day off? Should we have to change our schedule last minute? If something comes up, that could absolutely be something that they're worrying about. There's a whole bunch of things that they could be thinking.
Oh, sure. I think, let me jump in here too and say, it's funny too, and people don't say this out loud, but if the culture is for vets to take their day off and be off, veterinarians want to believe that they care about their clients and they care about their patients and they're good doctors. And so when it's basically the same thing as you skipping your lunch break. So if you skip your lunch break, other people start to feel a subtle pressure that they should skip their lunch break. And if you're the vet who comes in on your day off, I think other vets get a feeling sometimes that like you care about your patients more than they do, or the staff might think you care about your patients more than they do. And it takes a certain amount of confidence to say, I don't care if she comes in her day off. I'm not making that choice, and go on. But again, I will tell you that to your face. You can do that if you want. I'm not doing it. But I've also been doing this 15 years and my ego is pretty secure, as opposed to when I was 2-year, 3-year out vet and I really wanted to make everybody happy. And I didn't know what it really meant to me to be a quote unquote good veterinarian. I didn't know that. And so I was affected by that stuff.
And I think, when it comes to assuming good intent, like you were talking about the fact that you love what you do, and this is a client that trusts you like your neighbor, right? They trust you. You love taking care of animals. And so in the moment, it made sense from their backstory. Like, it makes sense. They care about their clients. They've worked hard to build this relationship with this particular client. The fact that they're a breeder is an extra fact. It's not the whole story. And I think that's easy to latch onto as being the whole story, right?
Yeah, I agree. That's a red herring for me. Like it doesn't matter who the person is. Let's just think about this in general terms. Well, I just want to throw in here too, just as an example. I have 100% done euthanasias on my day off. I have 100% done that. And so again, it doesn't require other staff. I can come in, I can get the stuff, I can go to the person's house, go to my neighbor's house, whatever. And so I am not going to stand here and be like, I just won't see people on the day off. It's like, man, I do love my job and I do love being there for people, and I have done that. And again, in my mind, that is a bit different for reasons we'll talk about in action steps, where I didn't pull staff away. I didn't take resources. There was another doctor that was raring to go and do this. It doesn't matter, I think.
Yeah, I think really, so there's the headspace for you, and then there's the headspace for the team. And it sounds like maybe they haven't actually asked the team what they're thinking, and the team may not truly understand what you're thinking. And so from an action step perspective, having that conversation is where it starts. But I think from leaving the headspace perspective, there's two really important questions that I think you have to consider. One is, I think no matter what, it is important to ask yourself and do the exercise of thinking, where is the line between going the extra mile and setting a precedent that may undermine the structure of the clinic, right? So to your point, when you have a big operation and one person goes rogue, it does have implications and impact to the rest of the team potentially. And so trying to do the thought exercise for yourself as a leader to think about the fact that there is a line somewhere in there between going above and beyond and doing something over and over again so that it becomes a process or a routine versus the exception. And I think your point was very valid that we all make exceptions at some point in time, right? And that's totally okay. And the question I would ask, is your team asking this because they don't feel like it's an exception, they feel like it's the rule? Or are they asking it, to your point, because there really is another story that they're telling themselves? Yeah. And they're using this as a convenient, excuse. And so the other piece of it is, how do you balance your role? How do you balance your role as a clinician and wanting what's best for the client and the patient with your role as a leader who needs to empower the team, because you want a work-life balance, and that only happens if the team shows up and does an excellent job and takes care of patients and clients when you're not there, especially in this kind of environment where you're not, you're pulling people together from a bunch of different locations on the weekend. So I think spending some time asking yourself those two questions will help in the action steps with how you approach this.
Yeah, I only have one action step, just so you know. We'll take a break and I'll tell you what my one action step is.
Okay.
All right. You ready? You ready for this one action step?
One action step.
Here's what it is a simple choice.
Okay, hit me.
It. All right. You choose how you suffer. That's it. You have one choice. You can do two things. You can either see the patient and do this thing, or you can not do it. And the whole answer is, to me, it's funny. I do not believe that if you see this, it will set a precedent and the whole function of the hospital will deteriorate. I don't believe that. But I will say, this is going to be a massive pain for you. That's it. So to our writer, there is not an option that is pain-free for you here. There's not.
Okay.
The honest to God truth is, you're going to pick one of two paths. And my advice to you is figure out which one is going to hurt less and then do that one. So here's path one. Okay. Path one is, you don't do this. you don't do this.
Sure.
And what that would involve is you communicate to the client, I'm not working on Saturdays. I'm not going to be able to get in there and do it. They've got their own system. They've got their own doctors. I can't do this. I'm sorry. But when you go there, this is the doctor that you're going to see. And this is what time you're going to need to be there. And you're going to set, and the doctors are not going to be me, but they are going to be lovely doctors. And here's what follow-up you can expect. And I'm happy to talk to you after it's over. You can give me a call on Saturday night and we'll talk about it if you want. Like, you can do that, but set clear expectations with the clients, set clear expectations with the team and the vet. Hey, this person's coming in. They can be a little bit of a handful, but they're quite nice. I've told them good things about you. Just listen to them. They know their stuff, and they are going to be good. Just lean in a little bit, but they'll be great. Know that she's probably going to text me questions and stuff like that. I'm not going to do anything to undermine you. Don't worry about that stuff, at all. I got your back. You're going to see a client that's kind of bonded to me, and that's okay. And great. Give them that heads up, right? And then what's the follow-up going to be like? Let them know, like, hey, this is when I'll talk to you. You can come back and see me for a recheck. Bam. And then you take the day off and you deal with this path. That's it.
Okay.
That's the only, the pain involved is you're not there for her and she's going to wish that you were, and you're going to wish you were, and you're not going to get to do a C-section you want to do. That's the pain in path 1. Path 2 is a little bit different.
Okay.
And this is the voice of experience, right? So number 1, if you really want to do the surgery, then you're going to need to get buy-in from the vet that you're going to be taking this case away from. Who's scheduled to be doing surgery, and are you going to be using their space? You need to figure out the logistics. Are you using their space? Are you using a different space? Are you using the surgery tech? Is the other vet going to want the surgery tech? Are there enough surgery techs for everybody? Are you going to be able to get in? What's it going to do to their flow? What's it going to do to their schedule? When are you going to be able to get in there? All of those sorts of things. And part of it is the actual logistics, and part of it is not ticking off the other veterinarian who's got a surgery day, and maybe he or she wants to do a C-section. And maybe they don't want to give you their surgery tech and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of politics of taking care of the vet that you're with. You got to get buy-in from the team. And that goes back to understanding what the support staff are going to need and how are the people going to feel if they get pulled into your thing. Are they going to be, I didn't realize this is something I'm embarrassed about, but I just didn't realize back in the day, I was just kind of a get things done kind of guy. And so I'd be like, hey, we're just going to sedate this dog real quick. And the staff would kind of look at me with wide eyes and be like, come on, it's not a big deal. Let's just do this thing. Well, it was always a bigger deal than I made it out to be. And then there's somebody, and then they're tied up, and they're trying to recover this patient that they shouldn't even technically be working on because work's not scheduled to be here. But then they're tied up in there. And the whole time what's going on in their mind, which I didn't have the experience to know, is they're like, I'm supposed to be working with Dr. Haight, and I'm not doing anything for Dr. Haight. And I feel like Dr. Haight's going to get angry when she keeps asking, where is this person? Where's this person? And I'm not there. And I'm causing this stress for them. So there's a lot of stuff like that where I just like, oh, I would take away the dental table to do this quick little lump removal or this quick little dermal thing or these biopsies or whatever. And so there was always ripple effects I did not anticipate. I was always pulling somebody away. I was always using equipment and time and stuff that other people needed. And I just had to get burned again and again and again. But you're going to have to get buy-in from the staff so that they don't feel like they're getting pulled onto something that they're not supposed to be doing. You're not the vet that they're scheduled to work with, all of that sort of stuff. You have to manage the perception of the team. Do they think that you're there because you don't trust them? That's a problem for you. If people think that you don't like them, it doesn't matter that you do like them. They're going to behave as if you don't like them, and they know it. And so you got to juggle that stuff. You got to manage the perception of your family. And this person says, oh, everything's cool. My work-life balance is cool. I don't know. Is it really? I would have to explain to my spouse why I was gone for the whole Saturday afternoon. But again, I'm in a different place. I got kids running around. We got stuff that I'm responsible for. And again, like the context matters here, but that is a thing, You do need to know that you are setting an expectation in this specific client's mind and possibly positively reinforcing behaviors around having access to you. So I'm not saying that other clients will all know that this happened and they'll demand the same treatment. But at least this person is going to have a new expectation about access to you and what you're going to do for them. And, if they have pushed for you to be there, then you are positively reinforcing that pushing behavior by doing this. And the last thing that I would say here, if you take this path, is you should decide you want to do it. And you should know about everything I just laid down, and you should address all those things, because if you don't address them, you're going to have to deal with them later on and not in a fun way. And so all those things have to be taken care of in order for you to go down this path. And the last thing is, and everybody needs to hear this, and this is not just vet advice, this is life advice. do not expect future goodwill from your decision to help this person. Don't expect it. Do not fall into the trap of saying, because I did this thing, next time or in the future, this person will be more understanding. They'll be nice to me. They'll do something for me in the future, or they'll support me in the future, or they'll be understanding in the future. Just in my experiences, you shouldn't count on it. Maybe that will happen and that will be nice, but you should only do it because you want to do it today to the level that you're willing to go down this path and deal with the suffering that I just laid out. So anyway, that's my whole action steps. Choose one or choose two. One is set clear expectations with the client, clear expectations with the team about this lady's coming in, and then enjoy your weekend. Step two, all of the things that I laid down that have to happen for you to get in here and not have this blow up and have people mad at you. To me, over time, I just accepted that I'm not going to go in and do the thing not because I don't want to. It's just a big headache. And the bigger the operation is, the bigger of a headache it is for me. And so I don't know. That's the choice that I think you have to make.
I agree with that. And I think I started a little further back in the sense that I think the action has to start regardless of which door you walk through. I think you have to do some work around figuring out what the actual issue is with the team. Because I'm not sure that this doctor seems to feel that it's a trust issue, but is that actually the issue or not?
Yeah, I think you're probably right about the digging in a little bit about where is this kind of coming from. I don't know. Like it's kind of interesting context. If you never do this and this is the first you're hearing of, if you come in on your day off, it will show that I might blow that off a little bit. You know what I mean? If I got a whiff of, I don't think the staff thinks that you trust them and this would further that viewpoint or opinion, I would immediately attack that and be like, all right, why do you think people feel that way? But again, that was sort of my point at the very beginning, I think, too, is I don't think the staff are one to say, Andy, when you come in and just start doing stuff, it's a huge pain in the butt. Nobody wants to help you because they're worried about getting in trouble. You get in the way and irritate all of us. And so they didn't want to tell me that. So they were like, Andy, we're worried about your work-life balance, and we really, really think that you should take Saturday off. And they would say that because then it was much kinder than, look, you're kind of a chaos Muppet and you make everything harder.
And I think just saying, I trust you and I know that you all are capable. Help me understand why this feels like it's a problem. And that just asking, help me understand, tell me what you're worried about, because then you have the information, I think, from a leader perspective to figure out, to your point, is this going to be a one-off where you choose to make an exception, or is this hints of a bigger problem, something more underlying, right? And then making sure that you're telling them, hey, I'm not setting this expectation for every client. Like this is an intentional one-time choice based on my relationship with this client. Like explaining to them the why. Like, why are you doing this? Because this is messing up your weekend. It's messing up their day. It's, making exceptions. So if you want to get any sort of buy-in from any of them, they have to understand the why. And so, bigger picture, having a conversation about, as a team, how do we maintain the client relationships? And I think this would be beneficial for a practice of this size and setup. How do we maintain those client relationships without creating the dependency on one vet? Because if you have a setup where you know that they're not going to necessarily see the same vet on weekends, it's like when you go from a one doctor to a two doctor practice, you have to make that transition plan of how are we going to get the clients to trust both vets and to trust the team. So it doesn't have to be the one doctor who's here all the time. It's the same on a multiplier scale when you have a big practice, which is how do we get the clients to have a sense of trust when they are, in this writer's words, giving blind faith by coming in and just trusting the reputation of the clinic and the practice when it is a roulette wheel, what doctor they might get on any given weekend. So I think figuring out what the actual issue with the team is important. And then to your point, if you're going to make a one-time exception, define the standard for that, for the team, so that they understand this is a one-time thing, or in certain circumstances, the doctor may choose to come in and take care of a client or patient, or they feel like it's warranted, but this should be the exception, not the rule. The team wants to hear, this is not a unilateral decision that you're making where you're just going to override them and say, because I told you. Because nobody, even our kids want to hear us say, because I told you so, right? The first question out of my kid's mouth is, but why, right? It's the same with the team. We can't just say, well, I'm going to do it and not expect them to ask why. So figuring out what that looks like. And then I think, to your point, if you want to have work-life balance, if this maybe is more than a one-time exception and coming in on your day off is happening more often than not, which it does for a lot of us, figuring out how to make that transition plan so that you can set up the high maintenance clients, because there will always be high maintenance clients, high relationship, high touch clients. How do you set them up for trust when you know that this is your model, right? How do you create that trust? How does your team know how and when to reach out to you proactively to help reassure clients, right? What do the boundaries look like there? Do you have a system so that the team knows, hey, you can call me on my days off, or I don't want to be called on my days off? The more doctors you get, the more you need those transition plans around time off, vacations, weekends, all of the above. So figuring out what that looks like with the team and then strengthening that so that you can continue to your point, if you choose to say no, make the clients feel seen and heard and supported so that they understand they are not going to get you. And this is what they are going to get, in a way that makes them feel like you're not saying take it or leave it, but are saying, oh yes, this is how I'm supporting you, because those two things feel really different. And I agree with you that I don't think that this is a slippery slope, in that if you do it one time, it's always going to be this way. And I do think that asking ourselves as leaders, part of our thought process as leaders has to be about sustainability, because we are really bad at saying no, a lot of us as a whole. And so figuring out, what do we want the precedent to be? Do I want to do this in 5 years? Do I still want to be getting calls on my weekend off? If the answer is a resounding no, then I better figure out a system to set the boundaries before it becomes unmanageable, when it's still maybe a one-off, right? Or if I want this to be my model, how do I help support that so that it's sustainable for the team? And so I think thinking about what those boundaries are, thinking about how we set them, and having conversation with the team is an important part of this process.
Yeah. Or you could just take your Saturday off. Those are the two best. It's your choice. Anyway, that's it. I don't mean to be glib. I said I love this. I love that. I like to work, and also it's just like you could do all that stuff, or you could just be like, yeah, you're gonna see Dr. Steve. He's great. I'll call you afterwards. You know, like that. That's the other option. But yeah, it's funny. Just anyway, yeah. Again, it's just context matters, and you know, like. In a little 3-vet practice, you can freestyle a lot more easily than you can in a big place with lots of people and moving parts and people you don't know that well. But anyway, that's that. That's all I got.
All right, that was fun. Have a great week, everybody.
Have a great week, everybody.
And that's a wrap on another episode of the Uncharted Podcast. Thanks for joining us and spending your week with us. If you enjoyed this week's episode, head over to wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way to let us know that you love listening. We'll see you next time.